Do we have an opening video or anything yet?
Nope.
Yay! Hi, everybody.
All right, we're good. We are live. And we are recording. So, well, that looks amazing other than the fact that I'm streaming at 720p at 30 frames per second.
I mean, they won't even give me the keys, so.
That's fair. All right, well, let's just do it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of MAD ISK. I'm your mad host, Lichgrave, and today I am joined by my very special guest, Ashtarothi 07.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is an awesome thing you're doing here. I'm excited to take part in it.
It is episode 2. It is MAD Invasions. We're going to be going over invasions. We're going to be going, at least what we know so far, we're going to be going over from the emerging conduits to the actual Triglavian invasions and potentially things that are happening in the future. So we shall see what happens. Ash, let's just go through the rundown. What are invasions? Who are invasions? When are invasions? That's probably too big of a question.
Well, we'll start with what. So the invasions are the titular feature of the latest expansion that happened at the beginning of summer, EVE Online Invasion, and is tied into the real-life world tour that they are doing, which is the Invasion World Tour. So what it basically boils down to is roughly a year and a half ago, we were introduced to a new species of a race of people known as the Triglavians. So far, we have basically only encountered them by going down into the abyss, which is a topic for a whole nother conversation. So we're just going to leave that where it is. But as of last spring, the Triglavians have decided to take the fight to our space, K-space, and predominantly high-sec space. So the invasions are very similar to Sancha incursions. They use a lot of the same back-end infrastructure to make them run, but they are different in some very key, distinct ways. In general, they last somewhere between 3 to 5 days in a system, and cover that system and make it more dangerous, but offer different rewards and status effects for any ships that are within those systems. And then most recently, towards the end of the summer, we've seen continued expansion of this content outside of the actual invasion sites themselves. We've seen invasions move into LOSEC, and we've seen the introduction of what's known as the Resna Borg packs, and the newest edition, outside of invasions, which would be the emerging conduits, which came out a little under a month ago. And then finally, as of this week, we now have a brand new site within the footholds, or the deepest parts of the invasions, that are known as the Stellar Accelerator. So we now have 4 different types of sites that happen inside of the invasion, and 2 types of things that happen outside of the invasions that are all kind of related to the same Triglavian threat.
And I think that's an important thing to remember is this is, as of this recording, which is 10/10/2019 at 12:08 p.m. So everything is subject to change. Everything is subject to alteration at the will of CCP. So we might get new things. Old things might become different, or we might see the removal of certain things completely. So
yeah, we are seeing these things change in subtle ways up to once or twice a week. We've even seen opportunities where things will stop spawning for a couple of hours, and then will come back in the same day, and subtle changes will be able to be noticed or not noticed, depending. For example, originally the packs did not warp to sealed conduits. We'll go into what that means later. Um, and then once the drifter attacks started and they changed the behavior of the drifters, that actually made it so they did warp to sealed conduits. And then at the beginning of the week, I noticed that they were no longer warping to sealed conduits. And then the day after I announced it, they started doing it again. So no matter what you've heard, unless you are caught up like to the day, do not expect that you know their behavior down to its minutia, because they are willing and able to change them pretty frequently.
So that is something to remember. All right, let's get into these real quick. Let's start with probably like let's start with the bare bones basis. The thing that most people have been doing a lot right now, and the thing that a lot of I'm going to say newer players are gravitating towards, which is the emergings. So let's start with these, and let's begin by explaining exactly what these things are and how they work. So, from what I
Well, I'm going
understand,
to go a little bit more basic
you want
and
to go
talk
more
about the
basic?
Triglavians themselves, because
Okay,
understanding how the Triglavians work and what their names mean help you understand how to fight them, no matter where you encounter them.
this is true.
Okay. So these naming conventions are the same whether or not they're in the Abyss or in Invasions. It doesn't matter. And so basically, every Triglavian has some sort of perk added onto it, above and beyond what it normally is. And the name that the rat has tells you which perk it has. So, for instance, a ghosting ship will be doing tracking disruption and missile disruption. A harrowing ship will be doing target painting. A renewing ship will be doing increased remote reps. It's worth noting that all Triglavian ships remote rep, but renewing will have stronger remote reps. You have the blinding, which do sensor dampening. You have the tangling, which are webifying. The anchoring, which is warp scrambling. That is important. I'm not. Sometimes when we talk about rats and we say the rats scram, we are misspeaking and actually talking about warp disruption. This is literally warp scrams. This is shutting off micro warp drives, shutting off micro jump drives, warp scram. Starving is the neutralizing energy newts. And then there's two special kinds of trig that show up in known space that do not show up in the abyss. The first is the Zoria's rats. And Zoria is kind of like an officer sort of thing, but they show up very, very commonly. They're not like a rare spawn or anything like that. Like in a single emerging conduit, you can have 2 to 3, for
More of a
example.
faction, really, with I believe they do have a chance of dropping the Zorius officer mod, but they're a faction spawn.
Only the Zorias inside of the World Arc. So that's the thing. Like there's a
Oh,
lot of confusion about all of this, and we don't all know 100% like what Zoria is and who Zoria is and what the ships are. But there are actually special Zorias inside of the hardest site, the World Arc site, and those are the ones that drop the Velas entropic radiation sinks, the Zoria's entropic radiation sinks, and the Zoria's guns. The other Zorias do not, but they do drop the quote unquote better loot. So they'll drop either a lot of red loot, or they'll drop the new mutaplasmids, the skill books, or the data cores.
okay. So there are named enemies, but they really don't act like named or faction spawns unless you're in the world arc, as far as we understand.
Right. And the ones in the world arc are named something different in and of themselves. Like, so instead of it just Zoria's Damovic, it'll be Zoria's Hotspar, TTC Taxi, or Tac 3 or something like that, right? So the normal Zorias that just spawn in the sites, they're just like super rats. They also carry an E-War depending on their size. So like the Damovic Zoria can scram, whereas the Zoria's Leshak carries dual counter-cycled heavy newts. So really nasty newt pressure. So you're going to see high E-ward and high damage out of these Zorias. That they are very similar to the other new kind of rats, which are harder to define because their name changes depending on where they are. They just don't have a they're not called an anchoring or anything like that. So you got just the no titled Resna Borg
Vanilla.
ships.
Let's just call them
The
vanilla
vanilla
for
ships.
now. Vanilla
Yeah,
Rasnaborgs. Yeah.
vanilla Rasnaborg, the liminal ships inside of Invasions, and finally the Sudenic ships inside of the World Arcs all basically are the same, which is that they can they're armed with what's called the Majorana missiles, which do very high EM kinetic damage. So while their disintegrators do high thermal with I think it's 65-35 thermal then explosive, that ramps up, right? So they start low and they go high. The Majorama starts with very high EM kinetic, but that does not ramp up.
Okay, so there are very specific ones that don't ramp, which is something that the
Well,
Triglavians
the
are.
missiles don't.
Okay, right. The missiles, of course, don't.
Their disintegrators still do. It's kind of confusing. So that you can look at their damage profile, and like I said, it's 65-35 for just a normal guy without a missile. With the missiles, it becomes like 11 and 9, with the remainder percent being split evenly between EM kinetic. But obviously, as they do damage, as they continue to hit on the same person, the percent of thermal explosive will go up because that is starting to ramp, while the damage from the missiles remains flat.
Right, makes sense.
But it is worth noting that those missiles are designed to hit into the hull. So while you are tanking majority thermal explosive, because that's what the rats are, for the most part, these liminals, or the unnamed ones or whatever, the vanilla ones, are also doing very high EM kinetic.
Right. So we know how these things work. Well, we sort of know how these things work. We know what we can hit them with. We know what they hit us with. So let's start getting specifically into the sites. And the first one, of
Yeah.
course, is the emerging. So let's go over the
Yes.
emerging real quick. Now, I've actually run a few of these, and it looks a lot like a minor conduit. Much smaller, but definitely still a minor conduit.
They're actually physically identical.
Are they?
Yeah, like I, to the point where I do what's called a secondary warp when you land on either the minor or the emerging conduits. They are not dead space. So there's
No,
kind of this
that's yeah.
triangle of rocks, right? And if you on the far end, there's a cluster of rocks that will be somewhere between 160 and 170 kilometers away. So you can actually, upon landing, do a second warp to those rocks at 70 and land roughly on top of the conduit that's spawning, that generates the rats. And this is true in both emergence and miners. So mechanically speaking, the only difference between the two are the rats that come out.
Okay. Wow. So that is something very different. From at least my understanding of it, which is of course firsthand. So yeah, we have three waves. First two waves are frigates and destroyers, an assortment of them. The third wave, there is a Zorius Vedmek spawn. It is noted that there can be a Zorius Kikimora in the second one. There's a potential.
Yep.
But that's not always 100%. Unlike the Vedmek, which is in the third one.
Right.
So these are all Rasnaborgs, right? I think aside from the
Yes.
Zoria spawns, these are all Rasnaborgs. So you're gonna see EM, thermal, kinetic, explosive. You're gonna see the full range here.
No, no. Well, so you'll see Resna Borg anchoring, or well, no, you won't see anchoring, but you'll see Resna Borg starving Damaviks, and those will be, they won't have the missiles. They'll only have the newts. It's only if you see Rasnaborg Damavik or Rasnaborg Kikimora without any other words in their title do you know that they fire the missiles.
So so okay, so that needs actually a little bit of clarification. Um, are the Rasnaborgs do the Rasnaborgs, the vanilla ones, always spawn?
It is a type of rat that can spawn, right? So like when it spawns like 8 to 10 rats, for instance, in the first wave, I believe. And all of those rats can be any of the rats that it could be. Like so they could be a Damavik or they could be a Kiki, and they could have any of the Ewar that is available to them, except for they, like I said, there are no anchoring that have been seen inside of emerging. That being said, there are anchoring Kikis and Damaviks in the files. So CCP could add these at any time. So be aware of that. But as of right now, we have never seen an anchoring Rasnaborg, but we have seen every other kind of E-War.
Okay, so so there's a chance that you can get no vanilla Rasnaborgs in a spawn. That's what I was trying to clarify.
I believe so. There seems to be some sort of limit of like only 2 or 3 of any type. So yeah, you can get no Resna Borg in a pack, but you probably will get up to 2 or 3 Resna Borg Damavix or Kikis in any given wave.
Okay, I was just no absolutes. I was just trying to make sure that there was no possibility, but if there is, okay, it's good to know.
I don't know if I've ever seen a wave that had none of them, but I'm sure it's possible.
Right. So, okay. Now, so let's talk about the first two waves are somewhere. Yeah, the first wave can be, the first wave is just a few spawns. Second wave is just a few more spawns. The third wave is actually where it gets a little bit interesting. So let's actually talk about this for a second. So the Zoria's Vedmak does, is it all four damage types, or is it just the
Yeah.
two?
So
So it's all
the
four.
Zoria's Vedmak should have Major Roma missiles, so do all 4 damage types, and I believe it also has newts. So you're gonna both of those threats come from the Zoria's Vedmak. Although it's worth noting that in that wave, there's just a lot of other stuff going on too. I've actually the way I lost my Ikitursa when I was experimenting was because I killed the Zoria, and that caused me to feel like I had stabilized when I hadn't, because I still had 3 Rasnabor Kikimoras on field that I hadn't identified. And so the damage was still way high. So even though the Zoria is a key piece to that fight, um, they definitely aren't the only danger in that wave. There's also another interesting thing about the Zoria's Vedmak in particular, and this is actually true about all of the Zoria spawns in well, at least in minors and in emerging, which is that the Zoria is actually independent of the wave itself, even though they spawn with the wave. So what this means is that if you kill all of the rats except for the Zoria's Vedmak will warp away, and the site will complete.
Okay, so that's actually important.
Yes, you either need to kill Zoria's Vedmak before you kill the last rat, or scram Zoria's Vedmak so that way they can't leave. But Zoria's Vedmak likes to stay at exactly 15 kilometers, which makes it very annoying to web or scram.
Yeah, they will run. They will try and keep that
Hmm.
optimal at any cost. So they will
And they're
run.
fast.
Oh yeah. So this specific last wave, we have the usually you get Rasnaborg Kikis and you get the Damavik. So the Rasnaborg Kikis are the heavy hitters, along with the Zorius Damavik, Vedmak, Vedmak. Oh boy. Um,
Zoria Cruiser.
yeah, the cruiser.
That's probably more helpful for our audience, anyways.
Yeah, the cruiser. So the cruiser and the destroyer. So the cruiser and the destroyers are the biggest hitters in that last wave.
Correct.
So specifically, when it comes to running these sites, would it be better to go after the destroyers, or is it really important to get that cruiser down?
Well, this is the interesting thing about fighting the Triglavians. Because they come with so many different kinds of E-War, what becomes the most highest, or what becomes the highest priority really depends on your circumstances and what ship you bring, right? So there's also probably 2 or 3 starving on the field too. So if your cap is not defended at all, if you've got no cap battery and you're not very cap stable, chances are they actually could chew you up that way, and so you need to prioritize a neuting. Or if you have expectations of moving, then maybe the tangling will become a huge priority to you, because if you get webbed down, you're in lots of trouble. But chances are, if you've made your ship to standard or whatever for an emerging conduit, chances are you will want to clear off the anchoring Kikis, or sorry, the Rasnabor Kikis and Zoria's Vedmak as your highest priority. I generally go after Zoria first.
Right, and this is where it gets kind of important to talk about. In the last episode, I went over the fittings, and then we went into the sites themselves. But I think specifically for the emergings, I wanted to go over how the sites worked and the spawns, because when it comes to fittings, there is a general direction that people are going into, but this is so new that it's not like what we were talking about with Hateless last episode with level 4 oh boy anomic
Oh, the
agents.
burner missions.
The burner missions,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, where this is 100% known. This isn't. This is
Right.
we're on the cutting edge here. I mean, the how long have we had the emergings? What has it been? 3 weeks?
2 to 3 weeks. Yeah,
Yeah, two to
somewhere
three
in there.
weeks. So, I mean, I mean, this is the bleeding edge here, ladies and gentlemen.
Mhm.
So I can't even begin to tell you exactly how to approach these sites because not only are they of a more we're going to say simplistic nature for the emphasis for the point of comparison between them and the actual invasions, but as well as the actual DPS of the sites also allow people to be a little bit more open in their ship selection and their weapon selection. So let's actually get into the specific fits. That way we can actually start tackling the specific way that specific third wave a little bit closer. Um,
Sure. Let's
so
talk about the different specific challenges that you're going to be building for if you're going to be doing a invasion, or sorry, emerging conduit fit. The
now,
first things for what
oh, sorry.
as
The first ship that I want to cover, because it's just the most, it seems to be the most popular currently, is the, oh my goodness, the battle cruiser Dracovic. So
yes.
let's talk about that Dracovic fit because there seems to be one that's constantly going
Yeah,
around.
well, Pockets DK put out a video very early on in which he had a triple rep Drekovic, and I saw it, and I think a couple other people did too, and said that, well, we could improve on this. And so there's been kind of a push to turn this Drekovic into its most like purest form, um, like how to get the most damage while keeping the tank high enough to actually hold. So I run a dual rep Drekovic that uses B-type reppers, although I've seen people use C-type, and a set of mid-grade Asclepians to push it over. Although I've also heard people using just like hard shell or whatever to push it over the edge. Because really, the only time that the damage pressure is really high is during that third wave.
Absolutely.
Um, the other advantage of the Drekovic in particular is that the Drekovic can load its utility highs with salvagers, which is a big piece of the emerging conduit's mechanics, which is that when an emerging conduit finishes, when you kill the last rat and you get paid out, exactly 60 seconds later, another emerging conduit will appear in the same system. So you can just roll these things over and over and over again, right? Which means that you want to get your whole site cleaned up by the end of that minute. And so the ability to salvage these wrecks and get the Triglavian salvage and loot while you are fighting is a big advantage, and one of the reasons why people end up really liking the Drekovic as a ship.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I also use a Dracovic with low grade Asclepians and a couple of actually abyssal um, reppers. But I
Right.
got some really nutty rolls, so that's what lets that happen. Um,
Yeah.
so there is still, even within the accepted, I guess, fit, there is still ways of playing around in there.
Oh, there's huge arguments going on right now because, as I said, because of the nature of the emerging conduits, they're designed to be rolled. Like you can just run one after another after another after another, which does two things. One, it really helps you get into a groove, right? It's just demanding enough. It's not an AFK gameplay, so you're constantly trying to keep up with what's going on. There's a very short refractory period, and then you're right back at it again. And so what ends up happening is people just do this for hours, right? Just zone out in the zone, kind of flow theory type stuff, and end up rolling a whole bunch of these guys. The other interesting thing about that fact is the fact that since you get paid out and you get paid out in LP, that means you have a perfect record of how long it takes you to run them site to site, which gives us an amazing metric to judge all these fits by. So now we have people that are arguing, oh, well, I made an 11-minute fit. I made a 15-minute fit, but it's safer. I made a 9-minute fit, but it's more dangerous. I made a 9-minute fit, but it's a battleship. I made a 10-minute fit, but it costs 3 billion ISK. You know what I mean? So like there are all these fun measures of what's going on. Everybody's making money, right? These things give money no matter what. It's just about what is best. So I've seen Hyperions, I've seen rattlesnakes, I saw smart bombing praxises and Leshaks in HISAC, which is hilarious in and of itself. There's all these different strategies that are being played out to see what to do with this otherwise very simple puzzle.
People have been using Marauders. I
Yes.
mean, so there's so much to go over, especially when it comes to each fit. But I did want to go over the Dracovic specifically because it does seem to be one of the most popular.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about that specific third room with the Dracovic. The newts, I don't believe there are any destroyer level newts. The only one that you really, I think, you have to worry about is the or the Vedmak, which is the cruiser, the Zorius spawn. But past that, I don't think there's anything else that you have to worry about, because the Damovic, the frigates, I mean, newt on them is so little. Specifically going to the Dracovic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So basically, just like the Resna Borg packs, which is a almost lesser version of even the emergence or emergings, um, these neuting Damovics are just not bringing the newts to bear. You're mostly worried about like in the Abyss, you've got the starving Vedmak, which is a cruiser that carries a heavy newt, which is just disgusting. And in Invasions, we have starving Damovics, or sorry, starving Drekovics, which is the battle cruiser, starving Leshaks. Well, actually, no, we don't have starving, but you have Zori's Leshak that has double newts. So those two things make massive newt pressure because they bring heavy newts and improved heavy newts. But these little tiny newts, unless you have no cap protection whatsoever, and you're riding the lightning with your cap, chances are they're not really the biggest threat that you got.
Yeah. So that's the current. I mean, I don't think there's any other ship that has really hit the spotlight as much as the Dracovic so far.
We're
But again,
seeing a lot of rattlesnakes.
we are seeing a lot of rattlesnakes, but rattlesnakes are kind of the
Mhm.
go-to, right? I mean, it's the
Right.
rattlesnake. And
Well, for newer players that want to get into it, battleships end up being probably the best answer. The final pack requires 800 DPS incoming tank.
yeah, so
So,
that's actually where I wanted to lead this. Is, of course,
mhm.
there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of people trying to figure this out, trying to understand what's happening here. For a newer player, for an alpha clone, for a newer player, for even somebody who says wants to get into this but doesn't fully understand what's going on, I guess the answer is, for the most part, start with a battleship, right? Is that the kind of the direction
Yeah,
that we
the Praxis makes a really good solution. The Abaddon I've seen being used very successfully. The issue that you run into when it comes to battleships is going to be application. So if you're looking at a battleship, you're going to want to look at the best application you can get out of a battleship. So pluses to tracking, pluses to missile explosion or velocity, all those kinds of things. Those are gonna be the ships that you look at. Otherwise, you're gonna need to look at battle cruisers that probably again have some sort of tanking bonus. So you're looking at like things like the Drake, can probably hang in there. But you're also probably going to look at slower times if you use ships like that.
Yeah, that is important to mention. So let's actually talk about, I mean, of course, it's Mad ISK. We're here to talk about ISK and ISK generation, and getting players financially on their feet. So let's talk about the payout for these specific sites. Now, I've actually done a few of these. There's LP and then there's ISK. And then there's also salvage. Salvage is a big part of this because the salvage goes into Tech 2 Triglavian production. So do we know the numbers specifically for the LP and the ISK payout per site?
Yes. So the ISK payout per site is 4.5 million ISK per person for the first 3 people. So it's got a grand total of, I think, what is that, 13 and a half, 12 and a half million ISK per site. And then if you have more than 3 people, then it's divided evenly among those that are there. So generally speaking, you'll want to have 3 or less people inside of the invasion sites, with 3 in order to soak up the maximum amount of the reward. In order to be eligible for a reward in all of these sites, you must not be cloaked, not be in a pod, and have done either damage or repped somebody who has done damage. But yeah, you get 4.5 million ISK and 300 LP per site. And then on top of that, you get both the salvage, but also the loot, which should not be underestimated.
Right.
Because while the problem is that the emergent conduits have become so popular that the price of the salvage has just tanked. I mean, it was already struggling because invasions are able to produce it at a very high rate, but this salvage is only useful for the four T2 Triglavian ships: the Ikitursa, the Zarmazd, the Draugr, and the Nurgle. And while some of those have seen an uptake in use, Ikis are very useful in the Abyss, especially in Abyssal PvP. We're seeing Nurgles begin to be picked up for various things. The Draugr still struggles, and the Zarmazd is crazy under the correct conditions. But even so, that's not a huge demand. And with this much salvage being flowed into the market, we're actually seeing a huge 10 to 20% decrease in the value of T2 salvage, which has also had the knock-on effect of actually increasing almost all useful Tech 1 Triglavian stuff, i.e. Abyssal loot, has up to doubled depending on what it is. Vedmak blueprints, zero point condensate, etc., have all basically doubled while the salvage has fallen.
And this is actually an important note, and then I'll go into a little bit of the economics for this. I mean, this is a lot of people say this is simple supply and demand. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that. This is one of those examples of bottlenecks where you have an extremely what was an extremely easy way of making lots of ISK in the very beginning because the salvage was worth so much, to the point where the amount of product that is being generated for the market has exceeded demand, which
Mm-hmm.
drives down the price, of course. And then you have the base products being the level ones, being the bottleneck now. So you have people in the abyss making more money because of it. This entire system, by the way, outside of the survey data and the ISK payout from the site, is completely basically in the hands of the players.
Right.
So this is an example, as opposed to, ratting in nullsec, doing havens, and in an extent very different from missions like we were talking in the last episode. The amount of ISK that you're going to be making out of these sites is heavily dependent on the market. So at
Mm-hmm.
the time of this recording, you could make 10, 15 mil, per site, but 20 weeks down the road, it's just like, I don't know, 5 6 months, a year down the road, whenever you're listening to this, those prices could have changed.
Correct. Well,
So
I mean, lots of things could change. I mean,
absolutely.
we have trig dreads that are coming. I mean, if they end up using it being a new use for the salvage, for example, then that would of course increase the demand on it.
Absolutely.
Uh,
So, and things are changing week to week. So as it
correct.
currently stands, it has been over farmed. The materials have dropped in price. So
But they're still valuable. And as you pointed
yeah,
out, and why I specified that there's loot and salvage is because the loot includes, as you mentioned, the Triglavian data sheets, which is actually commodity. DED and Concord stations have NPC buy orders for these things for 100,000 each. So that value is guaranteed. It's money in the bank if you can get it to a DED station.
I mean, in a
So
high-end jackpot, just because I've gotten this, a high-end jackpot for specifically the red loot will put you somewhere around 42 mil in red loot, for one site. And if you can complete that site in 10 minutes, I mean, again, that's a higher end spawn, but on average, you're looking between what, 25 to 30 mil for red loot. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the averages are. I haven't run enough of them.
of all the people that have been running it recently, the general consensus is that it's gone down in the last week, but it's sitting at roughly 20 million ISK on average per site. Now,
But
on
let's think about
average
that
is a
for a
strong
second.
on average.
Right. But let's think about that for a quick second, because if you can get a ship down to 15 minutes, right? 20
Well, my
mil.
direct does an 11.
Well, right. I mean, so let's just, if you go full ham, full, you get that thing to 10 minutes or under. I mean, that's 20 mil every 10 minutes times 60. Hello.
Yeah. I got 150, 160 million ISK worth of loot, like actual value of loot, in 4 or 5 sites. So, like I said, roughly 20 million per site.
160 mil roughly per hour. If you can get that down to that magical 10-minute mark.
That flow state where you just keep going. Yeah.
And that's not and
Um,
that's not counting any jackpots inside the Zorias, which could give you, I have seen the specialization skill books, and I have seen, crazy
you've not.
mutaplasmids drop.
You've not.
We haven't
You've
seen.
seen you've seen the Triglavian encryption methods and Triglavian quantum engineering books, which are the researching books, which have crashed in price. They're roughly about 10 to 15 million on average. You've also
Okay.
seen the mutaplasmids, but only the newest mutaplasmids, which would be the damage control, the assault damage control, and the ancillary reppers. So while those still kind of have value, they have completely been destroyed. They used to be 200 million each. Now you're lucky if you get like 5 for an unstable. It's actually at this point it's better to just use your unstables and hope for a good roll, and then see what to do with it once you get one.
I mean, I'm not trying to shill, but abyssal, was it abyssal trade dot
Yeah.
space? So, I mean,
Oh no, you're talking about mutaplasmids. Is that space?
mutaplasma.space. Yeah. So I mean, if you guys end up rolling, there is a market for that, and there's a secondary hand market. So, you know,
Yep.
seriously, take the don't skimp on those mutaplasmids. You could get some serious good rolls out of those. So yeah, we're looking about 20 mil per site. Magic flow state, we're looking at maybe 160 an hour, which isn't bad for a new player.
No, not at all. And remember, up to 3 people can be in these sites and can be working together. So with 2 of these Drekovics, we were getting down to 9-minute sites. So
I mean, there's that completely surpasses that magical number, and it adds an extra bit of LP and ISK.
right. And then if you have somebody bring a Noctis, but then also load damage drones, so that way they can assist one of the other combatants, then you don't even need salvagers. Then you could have like a rattlesnake and an Abaddon, and then have a Noctis supporting, and then that team could just destroy these sites.
Yep. So the point, basically, to sum it up, bring your friends, get friends. Because the more people, I mean, up to 3 people can be doing these sites. If somebody's running the sites, invite them to Fleet. Go ham.
Yep.
Because this will, this is one of those amazing things with these, with specifically the emergings that that we've been talking about, kind of off stream for weeks now, is you're running through space, some newbies trying to run these things in a praxis, invite them to Fleet, help them out, run the sites. You guys get that under that 9-minute timer. That newbie spends the next 4 hours, grinding with you. You guys split the loot. He walks away happy. You walk away happy. You might have just made a new friend. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an incredible recruiting tool too. Like,
It is crazy.
if you see somebody struggling, you can help them out. And the problem is there is a certain amount of like paranoia still, and a whole lot of like not wanting to share, especially since people still value the Zoria loot probably way higher than they should, given its real value because of its estimated value in game. It hasn't really caught up. But that being said, those people who do get past that and work together end up doing better. It's one of those cases where teamwork is in fact rewarded. And so um, I I expect that this is that friendship machine that CCP has been working on, right? A reason to be cooperatively working with another person that you may not have known ahead of time, and that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. And this is another thing, right? This is the why I do this show, is to, demystify the mystified, because again, a lot of people do think that these sites, the Zoria spawn is still an insane spawn. I mean, I'm still kind of I still kind of feel it whenever I see it, you know, but understanding more of what comes out of it, it's a different feeling now. But you still kind of get the
Yeah.
sense of like,
Also,
hey, this is a good spawn.
yeah, it's no coincidence that it's designed to develop groups of 3 people. Because a group of 3 people, that's a minor conduit group
Yep.
or
Yep.
a frigate abyss group. So they're building these teams of 3 players.
And that is important. I mean, you could, yeah. I mean, once you get those 3 players, you could transfer into abyssals. You could transfer into miners, which we're about to cover right now. So,
Mhm.
you know, endless expansion for this, and it's just another step up the ladder when it comes to Triglavian stuff. So, speaking of that stepping up the ladder, let's move on to the actual invasions.
All
Ooh
right.
boy. So we've had these for a while now, and
Well,
everybody, you
before
know,
we do, there's actually one more thing to talk about outside of the invasions that we kind of skipped
the
over,
LP.
which are the Resna Borg packs.
Oh, the Resna Borg packs. Well, yeah, I guess we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Well, we can go over that, and then we can go over the
Yeah.
LP, and then we can do
Yeah.
the. We have time.
Sounds good. This is super quick though, because the Resna Borg packs are very simple compared to the major conduits. Basically, any given system in HiSec seems to be able to become infected by these Rasnaborg packs, which are a group of 1 to 5 Rasnaborg Damaviks, I think. I don't know if there's Kikis in there. I don't think so. I think they're mostly Damaviks. Either way, they're pretty easy to fight. Most cruisers could take them on, for example. And the cool thing about these guys is that the predominant way to get them is to descan them. They warp around the site just like, or they warp around the system just like a invasion pack, but they're relatively small. So, and in the exact same way as the emergent conduit, as soon as you destroy the last Rasnaborg, a new pack will spawn somewhere else in the system. So you can actually roll these things in the same way. But the difference is that instead of waiting for the next anomaly to show up, you actually are having to descan them to hunt them down, which is a different level of fun. I know Exxon Fang, when these first came out, he loaded up a Cinnable with full hyperspatial rigs to warp quickly, so that way he could descan, get on them, kill them, get to the next one. And once again, pretty good money. They don't have a default payout because it's not a site, but they do drop the salvage and red loot and all that sort of stuff. So they can be pretty lucrative too. So you actually have this scale where it's like, I'm a new player. I just finished SOE Epic Arc. I should be strong enough at that point to probably take on the Rasnaborg if I know how, right? And then once I'm able to do that, then I can step up into emerging, and then to minors, majors, world arcs, and then I'm an Eve player, right? So, yeah. So that being said, let's move on to LP. So those are the 2 things that currently appear outside of invasions. Everything else in the invasion content appear within the invasion sites exclusively.
Just real quick, Hibarito, thank you for the Twitch Prime. Love you.
Awesome.
Thanks for supporting TAS. Yeah, so let's talk about the LP because this seems to be something that seriously a lot of people don't know about. Guys, new LP store.
Yeah. Well, and the stuff that comes out of the LP store is relevant to literally everyone.
Oh yeah.
Um, so we have this stuff. Well, let's take a step back. In Eve, we have boosters, which are like drugs, right? And so there are a lot of boosters in the game. That's a whole nother story for another show. But generally speaking, most of the boosters have some sort of possible drawback, right? So when you use it, you could have a side effect, and there's a whole gameplay around that. But then there's 2 types of drugs that have no drawback. The first one is the anti-pharmacon, which are the drifter drugs, which are now very difficult to get. I think you can only get them from drifter hives now. You used to be able to get them from the SOE LP store, so those are becoming increasingly rare and expensive. But then you also have the agency drugs. The agency drugs come from the live events that we used to have that we haven't had since last February. So the agency drugs come in 3 forms. There are the Pyrolancia, which does a flat bonus percent chance to both turrets and missile damage. You have the hard shell, which is a flat percent bonus to all active boosters, like a armor repper or a shield booster. And then you have the overclock, which is a straight bonus to speed, like velocity, right? Um, so, and they come in multiple levels, 1 through 4. The level 2 gives you a 5% bonus. So 5% damage, 5% tank, 5% speed. And those drugs, while they haven't been available as drops since February, are now available again exclusively from the DED store.
It's
So for
just
the
another
first time,
thing. Just another thing for you guys. Another reason for you guys to go out and grab those things. Seriously.
heck yeah, buy Pyro. So, I mean, if you think about it, if you're making over 100 million ISK per hour, or if you're doing any PvP whatsoever, you should absolutely be using Pyro and or hard shell. Or hard shell, depending on the situation. As I said, if your tank is a bit sketchy for these emergent conduits, for example, that 5% additional boost will probably do you pretty good because that's your raw hit points. That's before your resistance profile, right? So it's actually going to be way more than 5% additional tank if you think about it. Or, I mean, I expect very soon, once people start figuring this out, I don't expect a PvP fleet to go out without everybody having their pyro, right? Like, why would you give up 5% additional damage on all your munins or on all your max or whatever it is that the kids are using these days, right? Like, of course you will. So, having a good supply of these is going to be very, very important. And this is, again, the exclusive way to be able to get it. Now, there are other things also on the LP store, though, that beyond just these drugs. And there are the data cores and the skill books that are used for the invention, although I would strongly advise against buying either of those or any of the three of those from anybody because they drop so frequently in invasions and emergent conduits that basically they're worthless now. So they are an absolute waste of LP and ISK to buy. But we also still have the Triglavian Twilight skins for the normal. I think there's one for each race on the destroyer, cruiser, battlecruiser, and battleship level. These are really cool skins. Um, they have some interesting particle effects. They're black and silver and have like this black
Smoke. It's
wavy
like a
smoke.
smoke, yeah.
Well, there's a smoke that
Well,
comes
there's
out
a
the top,
smoke
but
that
then there's
comes,
like
yeah.
a
And then
on the
there's that
skin itself.
waviness, like a black red waviness thing happening there.
Right.
CCP, if
It
you're
looks like the
listening,
conduits.
CCP, if you're listening, seriously, please add that to more ships. I will buy it. Seriously, it is good.
Funny you should say that. When it first came out, the Invasions came out at the same time as the Trust and the Rust skins. And somebody made a mistake. And so the black effect was appearing on like the Hurricane Fleet issue for the Trust and the Rust,
Ooh.
which was kind of cool looking. And then they took it away and I was sad. But yeah, so you have that skin. And then you also have the Singularity Storm skin for the new T2 ships. So the Draugr, the Nurgle, and the Ikitursa. The Singularity Storm skins were from the Into Abyss event, not this summer, but the previous summer after the Abyss was released, where they released the prize for that was the Singularity Storm skin for all of the T1 ships. Now you have, well, at the time, so no Drekovic. So now you have that same skin for those other three ships, which is a pretty cool, like blue lightning with some extra lightning particle effects off the sides. So it's also a pretty decent skin. I've seen people hunt after that. I just looked on the market. There's a buy order on Jita for like 650 million. Most of the time, those things sell for roughly about $1 billion each.
So,
Um,
in conclusion, guys, buy Pyro.
buy Pyro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many good things. Also, the implants.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
the
There's
implants.
the
We
new
got
Mimesis
the
implants.
new Mimesis implants, which are also in the LP store as blueprints. So you do still have to build
Correct.
them, but they are LP based. You can purchase them, and I do believe let's cover those real quick. They reduce cycle time but increase damage output? Question mark.
Close.
Okay.
So they actually reduce the amount that it ramps per cycle, but then increases the
Okay.
maximum it can ramp. Okay. So for instance, and they now have the low grade and the mid grade mimesis. So the low grade I think is 25%, and the mid grade is like 33%. So for example, I was looking at a chart, Lashak that normally can do like what was it, 1.5, 2 point or whatever, scratches 3.5K DPS ramped up, and it takes roughly 4 to 5 minutes for Lashak to do that. What's interesting about that is because of the Ikisursa and Draugr's bonus to ramp height, that actually stacks with the Mimesis. So the Ikitursa and the Nurgle actually benefit extra from the Mimesis implants than even the other ships.
So for all of you guys who are, having those big Lashak bashing fleets, you guys can cut down your numbers by a fair bit now, which just makes it even more
Correct.
ISK efficient. So little gem for you guys, little nugget if you guys stuck with us this far.
Yeah, it's they're really bad for combat, obviously,
Of course.
because you're ramping slower, so you're doing less damage. That's bad. But basically, if you can bash a structure without being disrupted, or if you can pin down a titan or something that you want to chew on for a while without being stopped, then you can do some pretty amazing amounts of damage with a single ship.
Oh yeah. Okay, so we've covered emergings. We've covered the little packs that move around. We've covered the LP store. Let's start getting into the real meat of it, which is the actual invasions. First off,
Yes.
the miners. So let's go over the miners real quick.
Well,
We talked
we should
about
probably talk about the actual like invasions themselves, right?
this is true. You probably
Okay.
should. So Ashtarothi,
Yeah.
just give me a rundown of the invasions.
Super quick. So basically, every invasion is centered on what's called the foothold, right? And the foothold can now be anywhere in high sec or low sec, and they seem to be pushing further and further out as time goes on. The foothold, one jump from the foothold is what's known as the adjacent, and one jump from the adjacent is what's known as the perimeter. In the invasion systems, there are a series of status effects that affect everything within the system. There is a drone speed nerf and damage nerf. There is a hull hit point nerf. There is an agility buff, and there's a mining cycle speed nerf, which actually makes you sorry, mining cycle speed reduction, which basically means you're mining faster, right? And the closer you get to the foothold, the bigger these bonuses become. Additionally, the invasion has 4 different states. It starts in what's called a scouts reporting state. It then moves into conduits stabilized. It moves into world arc detected, and then it moves into forces withdrawing, right? And so I call that phase 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Very
Phase 1,
incursion esque, actually. If you
very
guys have ever run in
incursion-esque.
incursions, it's a very similar phase system.
Yep. Like I said, it uses a lot of the same backing like tech to make it work. So yeah. Um, any rate, so in phase 1, you will only get minor conduits and only in the foothold. In phase 2, those minor conduits push out, so now you get minor conduits in the adjacents and the foothold, and you now get majors in the foothold. And then finally, with World Arc detected, you get minors in all of the invasion site systems, including the perimeters. You get majors in adjacent and footholds, and of course the world arc in the foothold itself. And now the stellar accelerator also in the foothold. And then when you get to forces withdrawing is effectively identical to phase 2. So you'll still have majors and minors being in the adjacents and the foothold.
And for those who are wondering, um, the mothership site is what you're looking at as the background, as the backdrop for our little chat here. This is it.
Correct. That is
Um,
the Zordosh, the world arc.
yep, that's the thing. So that's the big bad. Go kill it. Go kill it, or don't.
You mean go fight near it for a while until it decides to leave?
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Spoilers. Shh. So
I call it foreshadowing.
so the miners.
Yes. Miners are very similar to emerging, as we pointed out. It is a triangle of rocks with a single conduit in the middle towards the far edge of the rocks. There is 3 waves of rats. The first wave is relatively small with the chance of spawning a Zoria's Damovic. Clever enough that Zoria's Damovic can actually spawn halfway through the wave, which is sort of sneaky. It's designed so that way you assess the entire wave and start fighting. And if you get overwhelmed and try to leave, you might not have noticed the Zoria's Damovic sneak in there and scram you. I've actually seen this happen to people. But after the first wave, the second wave can have a Zoria's Drekovic, I want to say. And then the third wave does have a Zoria's Lashak, always. Within these sites, you have normally up to I want to say that you can get battle cruisers, but it should be cruiser and below for sure in these in the minors. So you're going to get Redivas and Vedmax and Damoviks and Kikis, as well as the Zorias, and of course they can have all of the different E-Wars, including anchoring, in these sites. So um, and as with any of these sites, there's also wandering packs of rats when in any of the invasion systems. And these rats can warp in on your miners and any of the conduits that you're running within the invasion. So what this means is that while the basic core site of a miner is relatively simple, soloable in a golem, 3-man team takes it down pretty easily. It's designed for 1 to 3 people. Um, Very quickly it can go from casual to terrifying when a pack or two of 4 or 5 Leshaks and a bunch of other stuff that you weren't ready to handle land. And
And
so either you need to
this
be able to deal with that kind of escalation or know when to get the hell out.
and this is actually something that's very, I'm gonna say, almost kind of like a shtick or a very recurring theme with the Triglavians is adaptability. You have to be ready for anything at any given moment, because if you don't, you could find yourself uh, in a pod very quickly. So that is something to be said and to be taken into account when running these sites, is that you could always
Hmm.
have a group of just wandering, a fleet of just wandering ships jump on top of you. So,
And they are nasty. They
oh
can
yeah.
be very nasty. And that brings me to, like, a lot of people ask me what is the difference between these things and incursions, for example, the Sanche incursions. And in general, what I believe is that the incursions are fairly formulaic, right? They are event encounters that have specific rules and tasks that need to be done. And so you perform those tasks, and the group that performs them the fastest and most efficiently wins. In the abyss or in invasions, that isn't really the thing. The task itself is relatively simple most of the time. Just kill, survive and kill. But the random nature of it means that it is more about situational awareness, recognizing when things could go out of control, when they have gone out of control, and how to keep things in control. So you're always adapting to the situation that's being presented to you.
Yep. So let's start getting into the specifics. So, because the so let's go actually go over the major conduits and
Hmm.
then the world arc, because the fits are actually pretty similar amongst all of them for what's used.
Yes, we use. So the way my standard is, and I run a public fleet, right? So I have an expectation that my guys are maybe not necessarily bringing the absolute most optimal ships. They probably are new guys. They may not have ever fleeted before. So when I give you what I do, um, it's because I'm not dialed in. You know what I mean? Like an alliance or a running group that is willing to dedicate and mandate specific ships and specific fits and specific practices can probably do all of these way easier with way less than we do. Um, but what we do works. And so my standard is for a miner, I'm probably not going to start running miners unless I have two Logi. Two Logi becomes the backbone of everything because there's so much new pressure that can spike. The idea of like a local, like a Noneros or a Simi or even local reps becomes kind of scary because if you get neuted out, obviously that just cracks you in half, right? So the Guardians, Basilisks, Zarmazd, um, and like Nesters end up being preferred because they can also bring cap support, um, and their cap chain helps protect those who are under extreme newt pressure.
Yeah, and there's something to be said that because of a lot of the parallels with incursions, many, and we've from me and my fleets with six string, Wiz and Nexus, to even Ash's fleets, we found that the actually a lot of the incursion fits translate very well into invasions, with of
Yeah.
course a couple tweaks. So shield
Yeah, in
armor
general,
all depends on who's running it.
incursions want more buffer because they have really high damage input, so you need to be able to catch people. Whereas with the invasions, generally speaking, I prefer resistance because over time, with ramping up and big spikes of rats and whatnot, uh, they will put pressure on the amount of reps that you can put out at any given time, not necessarily how well you can land them. And therefore, the more damage you can slough via high resistances, the less likely that your Logi will become overwhelmed. And that's another piece to this, which is that every single spawn, which is more important with majors and world arcs, minors only do one spawn at a time. But with every spawn and every warpin has their own quote unquote brain. So while each squad of Triglavians may operate, like they may team up together on a specific target, they can also just as easily split targets. So you can get 3 to 4 people coming under pretty withering fire at the same time. And as a Logi, you have to coordinate well to make sure all of the everybody who comes under fire stays topped off, not really knowing necessarily how much damage is coming in to each of the targets at first,
And
if
this
that makes
is
sense.
one of those things. This actually ties back into the whole thing of adaptability. It's not just the DPS who's adapting to the new enemies on grid. It's also the Logi constantly trying to adapt to what are effectively multiple waves of quote unquote of enemies trying to do different things at any given point in time. So
Correct. And this really starts to get showcased in majors.
yeah,
So that's why. So for majors, I mandate at least 3 Logi and boosts. Anything less than that, and we are getting sketchy.
yeah.
And at least 2 of those Logi need to be cap chained.
So let's go over that now since we're just transitioning kind of into it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about majors. So the big difference, and I'm going to say this is big because of course there's more enemies, there's bigger waves. But the big difference between minors and majors is, at least the way I see it, is you can't warp around in those majors.
Right. It is dead space.
It is dead space, which has some very interesting lore implications. And if you want to hear more about that, twitch.tv/Ashtarothi. Um,
Appreciate it.
so
Um,
let's talk
yeah.
about these majors. So we can't warp around in them as opposed to the minors and the emergings. So what's kind of the game plan here? We have 3 different. It's 3 points where they'll spawn from,
At
but they
least
do
4,
this at
I
least.
think.
But they do this weird thing where they spawn, they warp away to like 100K, and then warp back on grid almost on top of you.
Correct.
So let let's
So
let's talk
we
about
call
these
this
waves.
repositioning. Um, Basically, rats inside of majors, world arcs, and even the new sites, the stellar accelerators, they can do what's called repositioning. Whereas in minors, if you are 100K off the rat, they will literally just chug towards you in a straight line, just like any other rat. In um, in these other sites, it appears as if the target's over 30 kilometers or so, maybe 40. I'm not 100% sure, but if a target has wandered off too far, or if somebody, or if they are spawning, say, in the conduit and therefore too far away from you, they will reposition. So they will warp 100 off and then warp back onto 0 or near 0, whatever their optimal is, onto the target of their choosing. So this manifests in 2 different ways. One, as you pointed out, they'll spawn, then you'll watch them all warp off, and then you'll watch them all land, and then that is when you begin to fight them. But the other thing is that we've had a few times where somebody forgets to anchor, or whatever, and so drifts off and gets like 40, 50 off before anybody notices. And our first indication that there's something horribly wrong is that suddenly all of the rats warp off. And we're like, wait a minute, why are they repositioned? Oh, shoot. And then they land on the 50. And now we have to support this guy that's 50 kilometers away under complete fire of the trig, which just fills under this theme that the trig will lull you into a false sense of security and then punish you for it every single time. Uh, yeah.
Oops, sorry. So let's go over that. So how many waves are in these majors? How many waves are we looking at?
Wait, that's actually harder for me to know for sure. I think it's 4 or 5. Um, they are a little bit more difficult to pin down because um, there's a lot more like warp ins and other stuff. It just takes a longer period of time. I think it's 4 or 5 waves. I always seem to lose track though. The issue is that the first wave is actually not a single wave. It's actually a uh, I hesitate to use word animation. It's an event, I guess, a timed event that happens once the first person lands. Basically, the conduits open one at a time and spawns rats like every 20, 30 seconds until believe 4 packs are spawned total. So, the goal here is that you're killing off the key rats as they spawn, so that way you're not being overwhelmed. The problem with this is that there are lots of people who like to warp to these sites and then warp off, therefore triggering this initial spawn, which is what I call a pre-spawn. And pre-spawns are some of the deadliest things in invasions.
No, we're talking in a lot of ambiguity because again, a lot of this information is very new. It hasn't been solved. We don't know everything when it comes to these things, and they're constantly changing every week. I mean, we didn't even what was these new sites we haven't even had for what, a week less. So, you know,
The which
the
ones? Oh, the
the
new
yeah,
accelerators?
the new
That's
accelerators.
last Tuesday.
I mean, that's last
2 days ago.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's 2 days ago. So I mean, there is a lot of ambiguity, and the reason for that is, I mean, all of this not only new but is changing
Mhm.
constantly. I mean, we're gonna talk about something that's literally 2 days old. So excuse us for our ambiguity. If you're listening to this, 5, 6 years or months down the road, pointing and laughing, saying, "These guys don't know anything. Look at them. They don't even know this." Understand that at the time, we don't even know. We are aware of chat, guys. We are aware of chat. I'm just saying.
I I would
Um,
argue that there's enough jitter to the program that there's a reason why I haven't locked down how many waves are in a major. Like, I haven't paid attention to that because that information doesn't matter. You sit there and fight until they stop coming, right? Like, the final wave, we've seen waves where it's like 2 Zorias Leshaks and 2 and 6 Damaviks, and we're like, "Oh, this must be the last wave," and then there's still another one, right? Like, there's enough jitter to it that I don't think that kind of knowledge is even that important. It's more just knowing what you need to do when different things happen.
right. No, but we try to have that ISK per hour efficiency, and it is one of those things
It's
where
true.
understanding how many waves there are is important. Um,
Well, in the
so
broad sense, I can say that when we're feeling good, we clear a major in about 15 to 20 minutes, and Six Strings crew in full try hard mode got them down to 6 minutes
yeah,
for a major.
we went kind of ham.
Yeah.
But
Once
that's how
again,
it
I mean,
is.
like, there's nothing wrong with that, but
No.
each person has their strategy, and
So
so like,
6 minutes,
yeah,
and the
6 minute
payout
6 minute majors are
is,
pretty incredible.
oh yeah, and it's so let's start getting into the fits are pretty simple if you've ever run in incursions. If you haven't, I'm gonna say somewhere in the ballpark of 60 to 80,000 EHP. Again, you can bring whatever you want, right? That's kind of the beauty of these sites, is they're still mostly new, so people are able to bring a lot of things, and it allows for the adaptability because it's not so hard set. So 60 to 80,000 EHP, I'm going to say, for minors, majors, somewhere close to 100,000 EHP with extremely high resistance, of course.
Yep.
That's going to be my
I've actually just
guesstimations.
yeah, sorry. I just reviewed my resist profile requirements, and after talking with Fansui about a lot of different the theories, and getting in the last patch, they made it so that we can see their proper damage profiles again. For a long time, it wasn't showing the disintegrator damage, so it was getting hard to pin down exactly what it was, and I was working off of memory. So our new requirements are 60, 80 to 85, 60, 60. So thermal is going to be way high because everybody does thermal. Everybody ramps thermal. Explosive is everybody is explosive and ramps explosive, but it's way lower. It's about half as much as thermal. And then only liminals and Zorias are going to be doing that EM kinetic. So we put EM kinetic and explosive on the same level.
So there you go.
Yep.
Let's talk about.
Also, you want to shoot. So as far as like what to shoot at them, we also did some pretty big math. And what we've come up with is if you can kill the rat before they get a single rep cycle, then it is more efficient to use thermal. But if they get repped at all, then it is more efficient to use explosive. So if you're an alpha E kind of ship, then you can use thermal. But generally speaking, uh, we preference explosive over thermal for income for outgoing damage.
If you can change your damage type.
Well, thankfully, every weapon system has some thermal or explosive solution.
That is true. So, there are advantages and disadvantages to each weapon type, but usually, that's how it is. Now let's.
It's also worth noting that once again, drones get a 50% nerf. So while you would expect to see things like rattlesnakes and gilas and other stuff like that, you don't see them nearly as much because they're not able to bring to bear but half of their normal potential.
That doesn't mean don't bring drones, because a
Mm.
drone cloud is still extremely advantageous.
Correct. So what we end up doing is we do a drone bunny where all of our main hitters slave off their drones to one person, and then that one person kind of points them from place to place. And optimally, what we like to do is actually have the drone bunny be like a Myrmidon or an Eos or something with drone speed bonuses. So that way the drone bunny can be carrying some web drones actually, because anything to slow these things down is useful. Uh, so like on my EOS, I have a web and a target painter. So I'll be commanding the drone swarm while everybody else is going after the bigger targets, which is useful because, like the anchoring Damavix, while they are incredibly important because if you want to get off, you can't if you're scrammed. At the same time, energy used killing those anchoring are not being used killing something else. So if you have like 4 or 5 starving on the field, starving Drekovics on the field, and 2 anchoring Damavix, like the priority becomes pretty split. So it's useful for the drone bunny to just remain focused on the Damavix, the small stuff, the anchorings, etc. Whereas the bigger hitters can work on the things that are like directly impacting the battlefield, like Leshaks and Dracovics.
Right. So we've talked about Logi, we've talked about DPS, we've talked about, all these different components. So specifically for the majors, let's start talking about the amount of people we can pull in here, because the minors
Mm.
is 3 people before things start getting a little bit, I believe it caps out at 3 people for the maximum amount of ISK potential in minors. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Miners are a total of 45 million ISK and 3,000 LP split evenly. But if you have less than 3 people, you will get the maximum payout, which is 15 million ISK and 1,000 LP. So if you once again, just like emergings, if you have less than 3 people, you're actually leaving ISK on the table.
Right. So let's talk about majors then. Where does this cap out?
Majors, I believe, have a limit of 6, I want to say. And it is 2,000 LP plus 20 million ISK per person. So I think that's 120 million ISK and 12,000 LP. That might be. I think that's correct. I'm looking at Eve Uni's website to verify things.
Head math says yes, but you know.
Well, it says 6 or 7, so I'm not sure which one they're multiplying by, but roughly that much. So you can expect up to 20 million ISK and 2,000 DEDLP if you have 6 pilots in a major. Less than that, and you are not only leaving money on the table, but god damn, are you you are either your major is going to take a long time because you don't have very much DPS, or you are riding the lightning because majors can get really scary.
Right. So that's majors.
Hmm.
Now comes the world arc, which is, as far as I understand, I've never run one, so I
Hmm.
don't know. But as far as I understand, it is a big step above majors. So take it away, because I have no idea what's going on here anymore.
Yeah, the World Arc is the closest thing I've seen to a full-on raid boss in EVE Online. It has phases, it has ads, it has uh all kinds of crazy stuff. So basically, you have the normal rats that can spawn. It actually spawns the rats from the maw of the World Arc. So the World Arc lights up, and then more rats come out, and they come out in like 2 or 3 waves at a time. We're talking about enough rats to fill your entire overview and scroll through it, like easily 50 to 100 rats on the field at one time, at several points during the World Arc fight. It gets kind of bonkers. And then on top of that, there are 3 to 4 times throughout the fight in which pylons spawn. These pylons are broadcast out an effect in an AoE range, and they come in different kinds. The very first ones that you get are webbing and disruption, dampening pylons, which are not terribly damaging. Then the next set that you get is ECM, which is much more nasty. And then the final pylon set is energy pulse pylons, which are smart bombs, basically. Um, which we'll get into that final pylon set a little bit more detail in just a second. In each of those pylon waves, you also get one transportation pylon. Now, all of these pylons can appear all over the place within the room, which means that pylons can actually spawn outside of the range, outside of their effective range. And the transportation pylon actually has a really short range. It's like 30 kilometers. But that being said, I know that at least the first transportation pylon is always very, very close to the fleet. Um, and the transportation pylon bushes a random ship 100 kilometers. So
Fun.
uh, basically, yeah. So one of your logi will just suddenly boop and be 70 kilometers away from everybody else. And thankfully, like we've gotten to the point where now we actually just slow burn back because our guardians can still reach that far, or basilisks or whatever. But it can be kind of sketchy, especially if you do have to bounce, to reposition, go to a different celestial and come back. Of course, no matter what celestial you warp to, there's going to be like 7 packs of rats sitting there waiting for you to kill you as soon as you land. So we've actually lost more logi bouncing than actually in the fights themselves for at least the first few weeks until we just stopped bouncing. Uh, but of course, those people are also, because they've been teleported away, they're exposed to other towers because you might have left other towers up, and now they've been booshed into other towers. I'm still waiting for the day that we leave a transportation pylon up at like 80, and then like one spawns nearby, and then booshes them away, and then and then the new one or the other one that's further away booshes them even further. I'm waiting for that. It's going to happen one of these days. Um, but yeah, so each wave has one of these transportation pylons that pretty much need to be burned down, and then they have the ones that I described. So on top of that, you have probably 6 to 10 plus waves of rats. Again, it's kind of hard to define how many waves because some of them will be like 2 back to back. Um, and there's also like the pylon waves and all that other stuff. We do know that there's twice that Azoria spawns. Azoria spawns halfway through it, and then Azoria spawns at the very, very end.
Now, as we talked about
Um,
in the beginning, these Zorias are actual faction officer spawns.
these are super special Zorias. Yes, these are all named um, Zorias, and they can be any size. They can be anything from a Damovic all the way up to a Leshak. And these are the big prize money. Big prize money. So a single Zoria drop can be worth anywhere from 1.5 to 10 billion ISK, depending on what drops.
From the Velas to the actual Zorius named. I mean, there's
Yes,
some serious ISK in these sites, and so
correct.
and you
Which
get
makes it
two
so
of
that,
them
yes, you get 2 shots at it. Chances, usually you get at least one like Vela's entropic radiation sink or something, right? Like you don't always get everything, you don't always get something. And the guns are still pretty rare, but if you loot them, chances are you'll get at least one thing between the two. Um, but this also brings up the fact that one of the biggest challenges of the World Arc isn't actually the World Arc itself. It's the fact that if you think about it, at any given time, there's only maybe 2 or 3 World Arcs in existence in New Eden at any given time, right? So there are people who know how much this stuff is worth, And so keep an eye on it. And it's just like that what is it? Who is it? Cable, who steals the loots from Sodios, that has just been such a big hubbub recently
Yeah,
because of
that
the
that
patch.
actually that did get patched. Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
But that is not a thing here.
So, and
When
if you
that
guys do
Zoria
want to,
dies,
and I'm just actually gonna shamelessly plug that if you guys do want to hear more about that, Caleb was actually going to release how he did it once that patch
yes,
went live. So be looking out for that, guys. That will be out there. So if you guys are even slightly interested in that, I'm just gonna plug that. All right, continue.
yeah. Well, I hope he does. We'll see. We'll see if he does. He said he would.
Yeah, we'll
No.
see.
Yeah, but these things are not protected by a lockbox, so anybody can come in and take it. So not only can they be stolen, and then they have to get off field. Also, remember this is in high sec, so even if you engage on the stolen loot, like if he steals it, he goes suspect, you shoot him, right? That puts you in a limited engagement with him, which means that none of your logi can rep you. So that person, whoever does it, is out of the game, is out of the fight. And worst case scenario, if the logi has not set their logistics to or their safety to red, they may even concord themselves.
So Concord
Um,
actually attacks in these systems now. They
well,
will.
it's still yeah. Yeah, Concord still is present in all of these systems, and because of the changes that were made to um,
That's right. The tax.
remote assistance, it is considered neutral logi, and therefore is greatly punished for doing so. So basically, if you are going to engage with these dudes that come to steal it, you need to have you need to have throwaway characters that are willing to sit out basically the rest of the fight, or you need to race them for the stuff. And in fact, one of the most recent techniques that we've been seeing a lot of is polarized Hekates or Hecates or whatever you want to call them. Um, they'll land right before the Zoria begins to spawn, and position themselves to where about Zoria gets to. And this polarized Hekate can do so much damage point blank with perfect application that unless you have a Vindicator also there and ready to go and on the Zoria, chances are that polarized Hekate can actually get the kill, and then he's not even stealing it. He just takes his loot and leaves, which is sort of unfortunate. And so how to deal with that is actually a big piece of the puzzle. Any rate, moving on. So about 30 to 40 minutes into the fight, you get the final pylon wave. And that pylon wave is going to be mostly energy pulse pylons, which is sort of convenient actually, because when that polarized Hekate comes in for the second one, he dies pretty frequently. But anywho, so you get the pylons spawn in, and then within about 10 seconds or so, the first wave comes out of the Zordash, and within another 5 seconds or so, the second wave comes out of the Zordash. And now you have easily 80 plus rats on the field. And one of them is Zoria. And when that Zoria spawns, it says in local that the Zoria appears to be attempting to give us a message. It seems to be issuing a formal challenge. And therefore, we've started to refer to this phase of the match as Zoria's challenge. And Zoria's challenge basically is just an increasing number of rats just coming in and just splitting damage, 4, 5, 6 people all taking damage at the same time. I've seen 2 guardians lose their cap at the exact same time because of the amount of newt pressure that they had. Um, the entire room is exploding because of the energy pulse pylon, so everyone's taking damage all over the place. And basically, you have to kill the transportation pylon if it's within 30 kilometers, kill the Zoria. As soon as you kill the Zoria, that ends the event. You get paid out, the towers begin to despawn, and the Zordosh begins to go away. But you still have upwards of, and usually 8 anchoring Damoviks on field with you on top of everything else. And so you have to clear off those rats, and you've got 2 choices. You can either clear off the anchoring and get off the field and come back for your loot, or you can sit there and fight them all. Um, it used to be that halfway through the fight, the rats would stop spawning Rex because they were using actually invasion rats as the second half. Abyssal rats as the second half. But now they've actually replaced those with what's called Sudenic rats, which we don't have any idea why they're called that or why they're different. Um, but these do drop wrecks. So staying and fighting and destroying them all is actually a valuable thing, especially since it seems, I'm not 100% sure, but it seems like that is the way to keep the site open. It used to be, this is something that we didn't really talk about with the previous two sites, but with the minor and major sites, once they complete, they don't actually despawn right away. They become what's called sealed conduits. Um, in order to allow you to continue to mine in them, because there's these special rocks in each of these conduits, you can still mine in them after the rats have, or after the conduit has been sealed. This is why I was talking earlier about whether or not there are warp-ins to sealed conduits, because if there are no warp-ins on a sealed conduit, then you can mine them 100% safely. But if there are warp-ins to sealed conduits, which as of right now there seems like there probably is, that remains very dangerous for your mining fleet without any sort of backup. So, getting back to the World Arc, in the World Arc, about 100 kilometers away, is the best ore in invasion sites. It's called Besnazine, and uh, the problem is that if you just kill the anchoring and warp off, the entire site despawns, including the rocks. So chances are, if you want to actually mine out the World Arc, you have to stay and fight and finish Zoria's challenge.
So that is insane because
Oh
there's
no,
a
it's great.
lot.
I posted a video on
Um,
YouTube. It is totally bonkers. The last 20 seconds or so, it's like 40 minutes of slog, and then 20 seconds of just like, oh my god, everything's on fire. Like that's when, I mean, like in 20 seconds we've lost 2 guardians and a vindicator, and then
so
gotten off. Like it's bad.
um, I was gonna go into the of course the question of ISK per site and amount of people, but it seems from what it sounds like you're saying, I'm gonna leave the people to run this site at triple question mark.
Well,
Or is there a cutoff here somewhere? I suppose for the ISK and LP there is, but
there is. It requires you to do it with at least 8 people if you want to get full payout, or sorry, 10 people to get at least full payout. I have heard of people doing these with 8. Now, generally speaking, if you're going to do these with only 8 players, you're going to need top tier equipment, including very expensive nesters as your logi, because they're the only things that can like 2-man logi these kinds of sites. And then you've pretty much got vindicators and other like Lashaks and that kind of tier equipment. When we do it, we generally do it with somewhere between 14 to 16 is when is like the lowest that we generally get away with it. I mandate 5 logi, at least 3 of which need to be cap chained, and of course boosts are mandated for a World Arc fight. I've seen groups of at least 25 people do it, but at that point it kind of trivializes the fight. But yeah, 15 people feel like a really good number to me.
okay. So this challenge that happens, I
Yes.
mean, I suppose that scales infinitely, I guess, or was I just not paying attention?
As soon as you kill the Zoria, the challenge is over. So
Okay.
if you dink around, then you could easily get very overwhelmed. But if you zero in on that Zoria, you can usually kill it in like 10, 20 seconds. And so, like I said, this is a very compressed amount of time in which a lot of things are all happening at once. Um, but yeah, if you pop the Zoria, get the loot, kill the anchoring, and then you're free to leave if you want.
Okay.
But no more rats will spawn after
A-
the Zoria.
And
Once
at that
once the Zoria
moment,
is dead, all of the pylons despawn. The arcs begins to despawn, like leave, for lack of a better word. And all you have to do is clean up what's left.
and the entire invasion node goes into forces withdrawing.
Incorrect. So
Incorrect.
unlike incursions, the running of the World Arc does not end the invasion. The World Arc will simply respawn again within an hour or two. It is just another kind of site.
Oh wow. Okay. So how many of these world arcs do we have to kill? Is there a final fight? Is there a mom basically for
No,
those who run invasion incursions? So there isn't.
nope. As we progress, as we kill things, as we seal sites, we kill Zorias, it continues to push the bar from the left to the right as it goes through all the phases, and at a certain point, about 60% of the way through, it transitions into forces withdrawing, and then it stays there for about half a day, and then
Okay.
it leaves.
Wow. So there's a big chance there to get lots of ISK.
Yep, we've run 2 or 3, or, I've seen people run 2, well, I think we've run 2 in one day. I think I've seen people have run 3. They're kind of exhausting, so they're kinda hard to do multiple at in a day.
I mean, for you hardcore PvEers though, I mean, and for the PvPers, because it seems like there's a pretty insane challenge in there as well. So
Yeah, I know that some of the more organized groups, like they'll go to the World Arc sites, like the World Arc system at the beginning of the day with their crew. They'll run the World Arc first thing first, and then they'll start rolling majors until it spawns again.
wow. I mean, there you go. That's a pretty interesting way of doing things. Now, so what's the payout basically? Maximum payout on the World Arc, maximum LP. What are we looking at if you actually manage to get through one of these things?
Yeah. Well, according to this, well, they just say, see, even Eve Uni has bad or incomplete information about this at the moment. Basically, for about 15 pilots, you get roughly 50 million ISK each, with about 4,000 LP each.
And
I have
this is the
seen,
DEDLP. All of these sites that we've
correct.
been talking about are the DEDLP, which we went over, earlier in the
Yep.
cast.
To put numbers to this, I actually just did the math yesterday. Currently, Pyro, all of these prices have crashed, so they were much higher. But Pyro is currently sitting at like 6,000 or 4,500 ISK per LP, and Hard Shell sitting at just over 6,000 ISK per LP. So way
It's
better
not
than
bad.
most LPs.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty strong. It
still
was
good.
at 20,000 ISK per LP, so my guys are really mad that Pyro crashed. But whatever, it happens.
Oh yeah.
Buy Pyro,
Buy Pyro, buy
keep
Hard
my
Shell,
wallet.
buy everything.
Yeah.
So let let's talk about these new sites. This is 2 days old, people. So everything that you're gonna hear is 100%. It's just it. Assume that it's going to change by the end of the week, which is
Yeah,
Thursday. So hey,
part of the problem is that it's hard to tell what is going on that might be a bug versus intentional as well.
well,
So
so
some
again,
of this is
let's
going to be
talk.
speculative.
Yeah, again, let's talk about what we know now for
Hmm.
sure. I mean, if it's speculation, we just have to
Yep.
assume that everything is snafu. So
So let's talk about what we know. What we know is that there is a stellar accelerator that spawns within footholds. It's a new kind of site. It is rated for 2 to 7 players. Um, it basically you go to the first location where there's a bunch of rats and an open abyssal gate, like the actual gates that conduits that are seen in the abyss, not a standard accelerator. Um, that gate is, however, open, so you do not need to engage the rats on the outside. You jump through and into a room, and there is 5 or 6 new Lashaks named Chisad Lashaks that seem to be building this new structure. They're broadcasting this yellowish beam, and you watch this structure assemble. They are defended by a squad of frigates and destroyers, and throughout the fight, more frigates and destroyers will warp in throughout the fight. The interesting thing about this site in particular is that acceleration gate is locks out anything bigger than a T2 cruiser, or T2 cruiser or bigger. So you can bring T1 cruiser and below. So pirates, faction, all that kind of stuff, fine. Hack, hick, command ship, not fine.
so I
Logi,
can't
not fine.
I can't bring Madrake and I can't bring Matengu.
You cannot. Nope.
Well, that's good. That's great. Thanks for coming, guys. Rothy. Thanks, guys. I'll see.
That's it.
Wow.
Have a good one, guys. Back it up.
Yeah.
Uh, so so yeah, we did it with 2 ospreys, and while it did get kind of sketched towards the end, we managed to hold it. So um, it's not terrible amounts of damage. It's just one of the things that we're still trying to figure out is what exactly we're supposed to be trying to do. Basically, what happens is that once the thing is assembled, um, you actually, like, you just keep fighting them, and then at a certain point you get paid out and then they leave. So um, you don't actually have to kill them to get to the payout. You just have to survive long enough. However, we of course speculate that there might be something different that happens if you manage to kill the Leshaks prior to it being assembled. That being said, one of the interesting quirks of this whole thing is that the site seems to respawn over and over again on the same grid. So the first day we had a guy in a pod that was just like sitting in that grid that seemed to always be running the site, like basically trigger the site every single time, which made it very difficult to get in there and actually experiment with this. And then yesterday, there was no good World Arc detected systems anywhere, so we couldn't actually do anything yesterday. So today is going to be our day 2 of attempting to poke at these things. And uh, once the structure is assembled, you can look at it and you can destroy it. And as long as it remains up, it broadcasts a series of additional effects to every ship within the system. So it increases tracking speed by 15%, missile explosion velocity by 15%. It reduces mining cycle time by an additional 10%. So now in a foothold, your mining cycle speed is reduced by a total of 50%. Um, and it also reduces warp speed by 30%, which is the only actual like straight up penalty in these effects. So this is really interesting to me because like mechanically you would think that our job is to destroy the thing, but all of the things that it gives us are beneficial to us, right? Because tracking these rats are actually a big problem. And so the fact that it aids in application actually should help the invasion runners. So it's almost as if the invasion runners want to make sure that these things get set up, and maybe it's the non-invasion runners that will probe it down and blow it up as a way of trolling them. I don't know. But at the same time, we also don't know if there's some sort of long-term effect of letting the Triglavians continue to have these accelerators on the sun. It could be that the status effects are just a bribe to make it so that we don't mess with it, and then they can conduct their Triglavian experiments. But it's really tough to say at this point. I can tell you that the payout is relatively low. I don't know exactly what the numbers are at this point, but it seems even probably rewarding on the level of miners or less. But like I said, they don't take very many people, and you don't actually have to kill them all to win. You just have to survive long enough. So yeah, it's other than that, it's kind of difficult to, or that's pretty much all I've got about it so far.
Well, thanks for sharing. I mean, bleeding edge is always something that's very difficult. I mean, we can sit here and talk about ways of making ISK that have existed for years, but to be on the current with what's happening now, I mean, it's extremely important, and it's one of those things.
Hmm.
So
Well, I know that this is called Mad ISK, and we're all about ISK, and that's the whole thing. But some of these things are very much about um, a different level, like engaging with this current ongoing plot line. There is a story kind of being written, and we are taking part in it. So the fact that the Triglavians have escalated to the point of having these stellar laboratories means something more than just another ISK making opportunity. Where it's going, it's difficult to say.
and but there's also to flip it around, being aware of this story is actually extremely important. I mean, I remember sitting there reading the world news, quote unquote, from Eve on the website, and I saw what was going to be the blackout basically 3 days in advance, or 2 or 3 days in advance. I forget exactly what the timing was, but so paying attention to what's happening with the Triglavians, with the events in the world, is, in a financial sense, extremely important, because you will be able to see things that are going to happen, days in advance, which could mean the difference between hundreds or tens of millions and tens of billions, really, of ISK, which is massive. Um, Now, I believe that's really much it for the sites. I think we've covered everything, right?
Um, I think so. I think the only other caveat that I'd like to point out is once again stressing that there are roaming packs in all of these systems. They can be on gates, they can be on station structures, pretty much any anomaly belts, moons, or not moons, but planets, etc. And they can range from pretty paltry with like a few frigates and destroyers all the way up to 20 plus man squads, including 4 Leshaks and Azoria or something like that. There can be anchoring in these roaming packs. I have had reports of anchoring on even a perimeter site or a perimeter system. So they are potentially disruptive to transportation within those systems. However, the anchoring, excuse me, the anchoring are extremely rare to the point where most people have never seen them actually on gates. And if there are no anchoring there, chances are there's going to be more than a couple tangling, which bleeds into the mechanic of turns out if you get webbed while you're going into warp, it makes you warp faster. So, assuming that there is no Triglavians on the field, or sorry, no scrambling trig on this field, they actually can help you get through their systems faster by webbing you. So, and then additionally, as I said earlier, there's rocks in all of these sites. The basic miners and emerging have talosite, which is just a little bit better than scordite. It's super scordite, I like to call it. So not that great unless you're in a foothold maximizing it's the bonus. But majors have about 50 kilometers to 100 kilometers away. They have chunks of Racnavine, and Racnavine contain 2 morphite per refining. Morphite is normally only obtainable in nullsec and only through dangerous mining techniques of what's that stuff called?
Mercoxit.
Mercoxic, right? So it's a way of gaining morphite in high sec without having to worry about that. Um, at 50 kilometers away, we have definitely managed to make it so that there's a skiff with slaved off drones that's over there mining with an orca doing shield boosts that's kind of positioned halfway. And so we're able to mine the site while we're also fighting in it. And that makes, a little bit of extra good ISK, which is kind of neat. And then, of course, the World Arc have the Besnazine, which is got even more morphite as well as other stuff. It's pretty valuable, but it's only found in the World Arc, and they're at least 100 kilometers away. So I guess bring a micro drive beacon or something.
Wow. Well,
The other thing,
cool.
the only other thing that I think is worth noting is that starting 3 weeks ago, about the same time as the emerging conduits, the invasion footholds have begun moving into low sec. So now, more often than not, invasions either require you to go into low sec or through low sec to get to. That being said, sites that are inside of low sec seem to be worth 40 to 50% additional rewards than sites that are in high sec, to the point where I talked to a bunch of snuff guys who run World Arcs with 8 players in low sec, and they showed me that they were getting payouts of over 100 million ISK for running the site.
Uh, okay, that's fantastic. I do want to just quickly wrap things up because I do have my little spiel that I do at the end. And we have
Sure thing.
plenty. We have like 15 minutes more for Q&A with the stream. But I just
Cool.
wanted to do my bit, which is, the Madisk specialty, which is how does this impact the greater world of Eve? Because every small thing that a person does, again, that butterfly effect, going back to the butterfly effect. So how does doing this impact the greater world that is Eve Online? And did I lose connection? No, we're good. Okay,
Nope.
I
There's a
dropped. I saw it. Okay, so how does this impact the greater world? Well, it's pretty simple. By running abyssals, by running these invasions, you are gathering materials to, build these new Triglavian ships that end up getting used in so many parts of this world. Every Triglavian ship that you see every T2 was gotten by an abyssal runner, was then built, sold on the market, or put into the Tech 2, which guys like Astarothi people like Six, all these different groups that run, went out there, got these materials, mined these ores potentially, came back and built these ships that you're now running. So for there's a good chance that Ikatursa you're flying, Ashtarothi might have built, or Torvald might have built, right? Because I know he does those every now and again. I think.
Yeah.
So
So I can break that process down if you want, real
uh,
quick.
sure. I mean, I would, I just wanted to say my bit, which is,
Yeah.
understand that the work that these guys do in these conduits impact your game, even if you may not know it. Every T2 you see flying out there is, every T2 you see flying out there has been done by one of these people who runs these sites. So,
Yep.
there's a little bit of thought when you're flying around in your Icky, and or you have that faction, that Vela super title on your Lashak, and you're thinking, wow, because Ashtarothi might have handled that thing for you, and now it's in your hands, blowing up a really, really spicy station. So, with that, we're gonna leave it to Q&A. Ash, you wanted to say your bit. We got about 15 minutes left, so we're gonna open up to Q&A with the peoples in chat. Ash, you
Sure
wanted to
thing.
say your bit, so
Yeah, I just to walk through the process of T2 construction, for example, because I think it's really interesting and smart how they've done it. So the world begin, every Triglavian ship or equipment begins as a biocache inside of the abyss. Each room in the abyss, you kill it, you get the loot. You can get either Isogen 10, 0 point condensate, or a blueprint. Those are three of the things that you can get out of these sites. We'll go into more of that probably once we can drag Fonsui on here to talk about abyss. But suffice it to say, you take those two things, the Isogen 10 and the 0 point condensate, and you mix it with a bunch of standard minerals, just the normal, I mined it out of a rock minerals, and you put them together with the blueprint, and out pops out your T1 ship. Okay. You then take a second blueprint and from the abyss, and you do invention on it, and that invention requires the Triglavian data cores from the invasion sites, as well as the skill from the invasion sites to do the invention, as well as a different skill and a race's ship skill. So I think it's three different skills that go into the effect of the invention and requires two data cores, depending on what it is that you're inventing. So, for instance, Amarian Starship Engineering and Triglavian data cores for Zarmazd, right? I think I might be missing I might mess up the data core, but you get the idea. So once you've invented your T2 blueprint, you then take the T1 ship that you've built, which is part of the input for your T2 blueprint, and you combine it with all of the different salvage that you get from these sites, as well as radar clusters, which are a T2 Mungu product, and a shield emitter and an armor plate from two different races, depending on which ship you are building. So each ship chooses a shield emitter and an armor plate from different races as their inputs. So those three Moongu inputs combine with the salvage that you've pulled and the T1 ship to out pops the T2 ship. It's just that simple.
there you go. So there's a comment in chat. Sounds like get the bounty in LP and run will be the best strategy for emergence. I mean, if you can pull off salvage, yeah. If you can pull off the salvage before the next site spawns, I would say yeah. Pull as much salvage as you can. But with considering how many people are running these and with how much salvage is actually being pulled out, yeah. I mean,
yeah, the rule of thumb is once the new site is up, you should be going there.
yep. So highest disc per
If you
hour,
can't
yeah.
salvage, yeah. If you can't salvage it all in time, you're leaving some on the table, but not much. Make sure to loot. That's where the majority of the salvage is consistent value. The loot is the real value, if that makes sense. 20 million ISK worth of data sheets will be 3 times more than the entire site and salvage combined if you get that.
Yeah, and for every person, and again, for every person that skips the salvage in the emergings, that also slowly trickles in, and it does increase the price of the salvage. So there's
Yep, and
incentive to not run that's one of the beauties of a fully player run economic system like that, and is that, you know, there is incentive to not do certain things, because by
Right.
not salvaging, you are, even if it's incremental, for your individual self, you are bumping up the price of these materials, and if enough people do it, suddenly that material starts becoming worth it again. So
Yeah. Well, and Joker points out that he does like 3 in a row. Like he'll bookmark them as he does them and then go back to them. This is actually not a terrible idea, given the fact that once these sites despawn, they're actually incredibly difficult um, to find again as a just like as a normal person. If you can't combat probe them and there's not, or if there's nothing in them to combat probe, it gets very difficult. Um, but additionally, another really interesting idea is that if you want to mine in high sec and you value your safety above anything else, just find an emerging conduit and finish it, and then stay in it with your miner, and then you've got all of the talosite to mine out. And as soon as that site is done, if they don't have combat probes, they cannot find you.
yeah, and with those emerging spawning constantly, I mean, somebody would have to go into that system and intentionally be looking for somebody running mining emerging conduits, and there's so many of those sites. So
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
And Faisal also points out that if you are interested in these emerging conduits, he has formed a new group called the Emerging Lurkers in-game channel. So it's Emerging Lurkers, which is very similar to the Abyssal Lurkers in-game channel for people who are interested in the Abyss. So both of those channels are available. You'll be able to find people that are interested in that activity, who are sharing and swapping the latest fits and strategies for
Ash,
this
you're also
stuff.
running all these different sites as well. Aside from the emergings, I think that's something that people do on their own time, but you are running the invasion sites as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
run I run public invasion fleets, basically, definitely 3 days a week, but more practically usually 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, um, for the majority of my streams. So people can check them out. People can drop in and out. Um, I collect all the loot, and we've got a payout system where I pay out people based on how much they've contributed. People seem to have a good time with it. I also still run emerging though. Like I ran him for a couple hours yesterday on stream. So I enjoy any opportunity to fire at things that are red triangles.
Absolutely. Hibarito in chat. Any noob ship fits for emergings? I believe we've settled on the Praxis, but there's a lot of things to work with there. I think there is a
Yeah,
fit for the Praxis
the
though that's very cheap.
the newest of the new can use the Praxis because the Praxis doesn't take any battleship skills at all. So the only thing you have to worry about is your weapon skills at that point. And the Praxis carries enough slots to be able to effectively tank it and do all the stuff you need to do, regardless of having weak skills. You can bring it up to snuff. That being said, there are plenty of other good solutions depending on how fast you want to do it and what kind of race you want to do it with. As I said, 800 DPS incoming, primary thermal with secondary of all of the rest, secondary optimal. Um, and at that point, it's just how fast you want to run them.
Yeah. Hateless, thank you for the raid. 45 people, oh 07, welcome. You're catching us at the tail end of the show. We did come in. We are at the Q&A section. We were just talking about invasions. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead, throw them into chat. But thank you again for the raid, man, oh 07. I really appreciate it. Hope you had a great stream. You guys will be able to catch the VOD of this as soon as we're done here. As well as on the YouTube channel as soon as that's up, which is youtube.com/talking in stations, I believe, or just search talking in stations in the YouTube, as well as on I forget the exact websites that we post the actual podcast onto when that's live, which there will be pings for.
Pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts.
Oh yeah,
But
basically.
Gamer William puts out, this is a sick looking abyssal room. This is actually K-Space. This is the World Arc. This is the Zordosh Proving Conduit.
Yep,
So this
we
is
were
the
talking about
largest of
this
the.
just
Yep.
earlier.
Yep. So this is the largest, biggest, scariest event site in Invasions, and all of the invasion systems kind of look like this. They've got that red cloud that overtakes the normal skybox that seems to get thicker and darker the deeper in and the more extreme of or the higher end of the invasion you get.
You guys can also see
So
the pylons that we were talking about earlier.
yep. Those probably are damping pylons. Might be ECM, hard to tell. But you can see that ring of like cloud. Well, there's the red ring. I think that's probably one type of pylon, and then the white ring is a second type of pylon. I think the white ring might be an ECM. The red ring, one of them is a smart bombing one, the one that's right in front of the Zordosh face, and then the rest of them, I'm not 100% sure.
So the kid asks, Ash, do you let people join your fleets or the fleets you stream, or is it just your group? Question
They're
mark.
totally open as long as you can either hit my standard for tanking or totally accept the fact that you probably will die. You're more than welcome to come into my fleets.
Terminus Thrall asks, how much ISK per hour is there to be had running invasions? So a decent amount, but to get more specific, if you were to go absolutely ham, I think not the emerging, not the miners, the major conduits. I think running major conduits with the 6-man perfectly kitted out, I think that's the highest ISK per hour, I think.
I don't know, man. Them emergents, if you
I
can just
know.
roll them for like hours, those things can probably
Well,
kick it.
6 minutes is what we got the majors
That's
down to,
true.
right? So, but I think if we estimate that, I mean, 6 people. So with the emergence alone, I think
Generally
we
speaking,
came up to
we've figured it.
160 millisec per hour, roughly 100 average, I guess, or 160 average, per emergence. Hey, Funsui, how's it going? Funsui in chat there also has a lot of information on this stuff.
It's basically 50 million to 150 million, depending on what you're doing and how dialed in you are while doing it.
Oh yeah.
But the thing is, this is the key for me, right? Like in almost any other video game, you pay to raid, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
if you're raiding in WoW, you're spending time getting your potions, you've got repair bills to deal with. You don't actually make money. You might get an item, but you don't make money off of the actual act of doing your raids. And in Eve, you do. So for me, at least, it isn't necessarily about the ISK per hour. Like I don't care that I could be making more money if I was running tier 5 Abyss, because if I run an hour of tier 5 Abyss, my brain is just fried, right? Like all my nerves are shot. I can run invasions for 10 hours in a row and I feel like I want to get up and do it again the next day. And that's that. And I'm doing it with, 10 to 15, 20 of my friends. So that to me is so much more valuable than absolutely maxing out your ISK per hour
But that's what
to
we're
me.
here to do. So.
That's fair. Like my point. I guess my point is
Sorry,
that
kid. It's just big business.
no, my point is that I will actually end up making more money
Oh yeah,
because I'll do
absolutely.
it
Yeah,
longer.
absolutely. Yeah.
I'll be able to stay dialed in longer and therefore make more than if I'm doing level 4 missions or ratting or mining or any of those other activities where within an hour or two I'll probably drift off. This will leave me engaged and doing stuff and making, we pull in anywhere from 1 billion to 2 billion ISK worth of loot every single day that gets divided up on top of all of the other payouts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the ISK is definitely there. And that 50 to 150 million ISK that I was just citing, that is not including the LP. So, there's pretty decent money in there. But as I said, more importantly, you're getting money doing something that I at least enjoy doing, not just I'm
Yeah.
doing it for the ISK.
One of the things, one of the most important things that I talk about here on MAD ISK is making sure that people, are doing I try to help people get set up in what they're doing so that they can then go on to explore. It's one of those things where find what you like that makes ISK, but at the same time, if you can't go out there and figure it out that you like it unless you have a minimum amount of investment, like like incursions, which requires a huge amount of investment for a new player. So that's what I try to do: get people, you know, financially fit to go out and try all these different things, or as they try it, become financially stable so that they can then turn around and start doing crazy things. It's one of those
Yep.
one of those awesome
Ad-
combos.
Additionally, unlike a lot of other ISK making systems, this stuff actually teaches you how to play the game. Mission running is mechanically different enough that it can actually teach you bad habits. Uh, ratting is quite often little more than just monitoring your your computer as it does its thing. Mining is certainly that. But the abyss, if you want to get all the way up to the top, you got to learn how to fly. Like you're gonna, otherwise you're gonna die. In the invasions, you need to learn how to work like a fleet, right? Like there's not a lot of maneuvering going on. That's mostly in the abyss, but you have to know how to follow primaries. You need to be able to identify things that are going wrong. You need to have quality logi. If you're fighting roaming packs, you warp around as a squad and keep an eye on your D scan and all of those kinds of things. Basically, what they've done is they've taken all of the components that are required for good flying, the skill set that it takes to be a decent pilot, and they've broken them up so that way you can practice them almost one at a time and gain prowess at playing the game, such that then when you do go to do PvP, you have the tool set needed to understand and learn and get better. Whereas before, like, we used to say just grab 10 frigates and go into low sec. Well, there's actually a really good chance that that person can lose those 10 frigates without really understanding what happened, how they could do better. And the only lesson that they've learned is that Eve is the kind of game that they're going to get kicked in the face over and over again, which is true, but doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So, a brand new pilot, less than a month in the game, if they start out, they get a team of three players with Punishers, start learning the Abyss, working their way up to like tier threes, and then start doing invasions and working on that until they can start making pretty decent money. By the end of that, they're gonna be an amazing pilot compared to just your average run of the mill ratter or whatever. And then on top of that, you have in particular two roles that are being really focused on. One is tackle. All of the skills for tackle are taught in the abyss. And the number two is logi. I don't care if it's rats or players, to a logi, it's all the same. Life bars are going from right to left. I don't care why. And so, from a logi point of view, all of the skills to being a good logi are required: triage, understanding how reps work, understanding how your tank works, cap chaining, adjusting cap chaining, getting boosted, getting jammed. All these things happen to the logi every single fight on some level. So, um, I would say that any logi that can make it through a World Arc fight in a team of 5 is probably capable of being a logi in any fleet you want to throw them in.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy. Zipando, thank you for the raid. 92 people. Thank you all. You're catching us at the tail end of our stream. We just talked about running invasion sites and how you can really maximize the amount of ISK and how you can get yourself set up in them. Again, we are at the tail end of our stream. We are doing a Q&A, so if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We are running close to our time limit. We're actually a few minutes over, but you did raid, so I'll leave it a few more minutes. In that time where you guys are asking questions, Ash, where can people catch you? What are you up to these days?
Well, I actually should be streaming already. I start usually about an hour ago and go on until 10 p.m. Pacific or so, running invasions, as I said, every Monday through Thursday on twitch.tv/Ashtarothi. We do other stuff too, but that's the predominant one. Also, I am the COO of Mauro Industries, who the CEO is in the chat right now. Mauro is a quickly growing corporation, and our mission statement is to maximize engagement with EVE Online with a specific focus on high security space. We have sister corps to do low sec faction warfare and null sec. Our primary focus is on high sec. One of the things I'm really proud of is the fact that now, as of a couple weeks ago, Mauro is the 9th largest corporation that is not part of an alliance in EVE Online. So obviously, there's a lot of interest in what we're doing and interest in what's going on, excitement, and I think that that's a really good thing. We're trying to unlock this game for people, and what I'm finding is that we're not only getting a lot of newer players, but in particular, we're getting a lot of older players, people who have maybe played the game back in 2010 or 2000, even 2006, 2014, whatever. And they joined the game and they were looking for certain things. And eventually they just didn't find it. They didn't find a game that engaged with them. And now that they see this kind of stuff, they're thinking, hey, wait, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what I've been wanting. And so we've had a lot of returning players who have been very interested in this stuff. So, I recommend just give it a shot, man. It's
Yeah.
good stuff.
Gamer William asks, "What's this World Arc stuff? What is that World Arc stuff?" So this is yeah, that's the site. That's what it looks like. That's all the madness that exists within there. Really crazy fun. If you guys want to again fly with Ash, go do one of those whenever you can.
On my YouTube channel, I post some
Yeah.
of
So
my
where can
Twitch
people
highlights.
where can people find you? Like aside from Twitch.
The most bestest place is on Twitter. I'm Ashtarothi on Twitter. That's where I post any of my news. Although I believe I'm going to be starting to do that on the Talking Stations Twitter, but hard to tell. But like, if anytime I get reported anything, or we know anything new about the behavior of Resna Borg or any of those kinds of stuff, I post it on my Twitter. And then, like I said, I also have a YouTube channel, but that one's, I mean, just search YouTube for Ashtarothi. I'm not cool enough to have my own customized URL yet. But yeah, so I've got our very first World Arc fight, which was not the cleanest, but it was fun. And we also I just posted our first attempt at the Stellar Accelerator. So if you want to see the animation of it being brought in or whatever, realize that we didn't know what we were doing. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that we fully engaged with the site. There's my one comment is about how boring it looks, but that's because like we were just basically watching it happen. We didn't, but either way, it's a really awesome animation if you want to check it out. And as I said, I post highlights there fairly frequently, but predominantly my Twitch or my Twitter.
Yeah, you guys can as well catch me over at twitter.com for at Lichgrave1. I'm also here on Twitch at twitch.tv/Lichgrave. I've been playing a lot of Apex, so you guys can catch me doing that. Really looking forward to Nova, seeing what comes out of that. Really looking forward to Vegas. So we'll see.
I will say to that, there's a lot going on in the story that points directly to Project Nova, but I think that's a conversation for another day.
That is a conversation for your stream, my friend. So again, if you guys missed the episode, you guys can check the VOD, of course, on Twitch. It will also be on YouTube at youtube.com Talking in Stations. You guys will be able to catch it there and wherever you normally consume your podcasts when that's available. There will be pings. So Ash, are you gonna stream soon-ish?
Yes. I mean, I could go live now, but probably give me about 5-10 minutes. I know that if we could do a whole raid, and that'd be super awesome. But um,
I mean,
oh,
you go ahead.
thank you, Liz. Liz just reminded me of something. I guess I can announce it now. It looks like I'm officially going to EVE Vegas.
Hey, how about that? I will also be attempting to attend EVE Vegas. We're still kind of on the rocks, but it's looking more and more like a yes. So I will be there as well. You guys will be able to catch me, Ashtarothi. So there'll be a whole bunch of us there from Streamfleet. So if you guys want to hang out with us, and
It is the last Vegas, EVE Vegas, so it's going to be pretty exciting.
Supported by CCP.
Yeah, you're right.
Let's not throw them under the bus quite just yet.
You're right. It'll be the last EVE Vegas TMCR. But the skin that comes with it, the 3 new skins are absolutely amazing.
Yep.
I know there are some people that think that they're like, oh, it's so gaudy. I'm like, well, it's a Vegas skin, dude. Like there can't be a skin that's gaudier than the EVE Vegas skin. I'm sorry. It's just
that's a fair point.
it's not allowed.
Yeah, we can just float here for a few minutes. Ash, if you want to get set up, I can continue to answer questions in chat, and then I can also get somebody to set up a raid for you whenever you're ready. So,
Sure thing.
yeah, we can just float around
Here.
here.
Yeah.
But
And if
yeah,
we're doing that, let me just go make a cup of coffee, and then I'll sit down and we'll be good to go. Luckily, my green screen and everything's already set up.
cool. So
So
yeah,
5 minutes maybe.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, again, more questions in chat about the invasions. I can attempt to answer as far as what we talked about. Um, and yeah, that's one of those things. You guys can also catch me. We'll see if I can't get some better some better graphics for the show. We are work in progress. For those of you who were here the first episode, I had a bit of an XLR cable issue, which kind of explains as to why the audio was a bit subpar. But now it seems like everything kind of worked itself out, which I'm glad. It's nice to see that that everything is working perfectly fine, which tells me that within the next bit, um, it
Actually,
should break.
it glitched just a little bit when you said perfectly fine, which was pretty awesome.
The universe has its ways. What else have I been doing? So yeah, I've been kind of just like floating around a whole bunch of games. I've been really getting into Apex Legends. My FPSs are my home, so that's I've been streaming a lot of that. I used to do some market streams here in Eve. Might bring those back. We'll see. Of course, I've been doing the Mad ISK show. I've been, of course, running with Einstein Rosen Brigade, ERB, which is a C4 wormhole alliance, very new player friendly. So if you guys have ever wanted to give wormholes a try, there we are. So I have been running around in wormholes as much as I can, helping supply them with materials and things that they need in their hole. I am a market trader, so that is kind of my thing, market maker. That's my game in
Ein-
Eve, and that's why I'm doing what I do here.
Einstein Rosenberg Brigade is one of the very few corporations that I will just outright endorse. Anytime anybody needs a good home, it's ran by Gabby, I believe, right? She
Yep, it's
runs it, right?
Gabby, Emily and
Yeah, and
Farah.
she is
That's her name.
so amazing that last time I talked with her, I was talking up all of it, including her, and I didn't realize that I was talking with her in the room, and she didn't say anything, all polite about it, and then later on slipped it to me. So I appreciate it. That's the kind of cool person she is.
She hears these, by the way. Every
I
time
know.
there's a
Hi.
plug, she hears them. So
Oh no, she knows. I met her at Vegas the last time, and she has
well, she'll be
rapidly
there. She'll be there
become
this
in my
time.
top 5
So
people in all of Eve.
she'll be there this
Awesome.
time. So you
Yep.
guys will be able to catch Gabby and her boys in all the insanity that we get up to.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
Liz is going to be there too.
yeah,
That's good.
Liz. Yeah. So
And
yeah,
Hateless.
Hateless. That's true. And Six String and Torvald. So
Mm-hmm.
just the whole streamer gang. You know, the basically the stream fleet's getting together. So if you guys have enjoyed any content creators from Street Fleet, from my market nonsense to Ash's lore nonsense to Six's I guess the abyssal nonsense and Torvald's PvP abyssal nonsense, there's a lot of
Just
nonsense going
Torvald's
on.
nonsense.
Just the just nonsense. If you guys enjoyed the nonsense that we all get up to, I mean, you guys are gonna love it at Vegas then. So, yeah, there's a
I'm not
lot
going
of
to
fun to
comment on
be.
chat right now. Moving on. All right. Let me get my cup of coffee, and then I should be good to go. I appreciate the opportunity to.
Absolutely, guys. Episode 3, TBA. We don't know what's going to be happening. This is episode 2. Went amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, you did a great job.
episode 3, TBA.
Oh,
We don't even know the topics, so be on the lookout
in
for that.
other news,
Yeah. So just real quick, 2 weeks from now, Thursday, time TBA still. I wasn't aware that we were gonna do this today either. The time just slipped away. So, just be aware. 2 weeks from now, there might be an episode because we do have Eve Vegas. So we might take a break and then come back the week after. So we have a lot to talk about, but we'll see. So yeah, but normally every other Thursday, so 2 weeks from today, is when this show is live. And again, we'll see about the time schedule. That's TBA, but roughly around now seems like a good time, between 12 to 2 PST. So, Ash?
Yep. I am live, by the way, and also in unrelated but streamer news, Eve Scout is back. I rated him last night. I don't know if you guys don't know who Eve Scout is. He is one of my favorite streamers. He is a big member in Signal Cartel. He is basically the inventor of the rule of 6 and the biggest advocate for exploration in Eve that I know. Really great guy. He took the summer off, and last night was his first stream back. So I'm super pumped to have him back in our community.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I'm good to go whenever you are.
Yep, we're getting set up here. So again, guys, thank you all so much for coming out and watching. I've been Lichgrave. This has been Mad ISK. We're going to be rating Ashtarothi real soon. Again, you guys can catch me over at twitch.tv/Lichgrave, youtube.com Lichgrave, and Twitter at Lichgrave1. Ash is at twitch.tv Ashtarothi, YouTube Ashtarothi, and the Twitter handle Ashtarothi. So for that,
I try to keep it simple.
all right, and past that, thank you all for watching Talking in Stations Mad ISK. We again appreciate it, and thank you all. So we're going to be passing this over to Ash. Thank you all for watching, and fly safe.
07.
Later, guys.
Alrighty.